What's up, everybody? So we have a great episode coming up. I'm super excited about this one. Getting back into the flow of things. I have not donned my chains and rings in months, so thought I'd go ahead and rock them again just because they make me feel good. So as you can hear, I kind of have a little bit of a cold. It's not COVID, don't worry. I already got checked, so it's not COVID. It's typically really just a cold. That's right. The good old-fashioned cold still exists out there, people. It really still exists. Isn't that great? I mean, every time somebody has the sniffles, it's not freaking COVID. Got my whiskey. I hope you got yours. We're gonna do this. So, all right. So let's get started. What's up, everybody? Blessed be. My name is Manon, and you're watching Witch in the Working, where we will be discussing all things witchy in and around, throughout and about, above, below, and beyond. Please visit me on my other platforms as well, including Facebook, Instagram, and Patreon, all linked down in the description below. The full script to this video and most of the others is available on my Patreon account for download if desired. Also, please visit my Shopify store, also listed in the description down below, to get your Witch in the Working shirt, mugs, bags, beanies, or what have you. So, throughout history, there's been numerous skills and practices, so to speak, that have been incorporated or discovered by multiple occult and religious systems across the board. Sometimes these practices were straightforward and simple procedures that people just went along with, and they became a part of their everyday life and cultural beliefs. Other practices were a little heavier and took practice, study, and determination to engage in. For instance, meditation, spirit journey, shape-shifting, channeling, and especially our subject, this Witch in the Working, which is astral travel. So on this episode, I'm going to talk about and introduce you to an amazing concept and practice called astral projection and get you started on your journey with this amazing and spectacular ability. So without further ado, roll that intro. Welcome back, everybody. So as I mentioned before the intro, we will be talking all about astral projection this episode. This is one of those subjects that has yet to be proven by science, so it's a rough one to cover as most everything about it is very, very gray and in the mystery, so to speak. This is okay, as all of the great things about witchcraft and other occult subjects usually linger in the gray somewhere. And as I've mentioned in videos before, this gray area is where the fun stuff we as witches and musicians love to play with occurs. You can't live life doing the craft as one of these black and white peoples where everything has to have an absolute or a reasoning and an answer. Some things in the occult just aren't meant to have a reasoning. Well, as of right now anyways. We just know that for us, it works. And the reality is you have to have an open mind and be ready to believe in that which is unbelievable. Only then will the unbelievable become a reality. Astral projection is in this gray area, as I will discuss shortly. What is astral projection? According to Wikipedia, astral projection, or astral travel, is a term used in esotericism to describe an intentional out-of-body experience, or an ubi, they'll call it, that assumes the existence of a soul called an astral body that is separate from the physical body and capable of traveling outside it through the physical and astral universes. To simplify this in Manon terms, it's the ability and practice of being able to travel outside of your physical body with your spirit and ultimately visit other places and realms of existences through these means. This is also called astral travel, as Wikipedia mentions. There's also something that is bounced around the communities called an ubi, or an out-of-body experience. This is relatively the same concept, except it happens without your intention. So your spirit will leave your body without you willing it to, or by accident. Sometimes any out-of-body experience will occur during a major trauma in our life, or most often, when we're sleeping or something like that. To give an example, I once saw a documentary about an American soldier who was once captured by the enemy and was being tortured. The circumstance was so greatly intense and traumatic for him that he explained that in a moment, he was actually outside of his body and watching these people torture him, but was no longer in pain and he felt at peace, so to speak. Eventually, he re-entered his body to return to the pain and discomfort, but nonetheless had a few brief moments of relief. Another example that you too can watch yourself is in the 1991 movie The Pit and the Pendulum. The young witch in this movie is being tortured during the Inquisition, and ultimately an elder witch teaches her to leave her body so she can escape from the horror. All is going well until the young witch looks at her feet, much to the older witch's demands not to look at her feet, and when she does, she snaps back into her body and passes out from the pain of the torture. Check it out. It's a great example, though a little disturbing for some. I myself have experienced out-of-body experiences multiple times, and most likely many of you have too. When I do it, I'm usually sleeping, and then I'll pop out. I'll jump out of my body and travel at least once a month, where I won't go far, just within, say, 100 yards of my body. I don't do this on purpose, and I can make it happen, well, some of the times, but not instantly. But when I do, I feel like I'm swimming through the air, flying but swimming through the air. Sometimes when I stop, I actually start sinking towards the ground, never touching it, but getting close until I swim myself back up to a few feet off the ground, usually floating parallel to the ground. I never go very high either, only within like 10 feet. I also never really try to travel astrally very far or out of this realm. For some reason, most likely my comfort level, I stick around my body, like I said, within 100 yards, a guesstimate at the most. It isn't long and I snap back into my body. Literally, I'll wake up in a jumping motion and my entire body jumps. This is thought to be the soul, like snapping back into the body. Have any of you experienced this type of out-of-body experience? Let us all know in the comments below. Much like the ghost hunting video, I have a feeling we're going to see a lot of people posting about similar experiences. So how does one snap back into the body? What keeps us from leaving our bodies and getting lost? After all, the astral can be infinite as far as we know. It's believed our soul is attached to our bodies via a special spirit rope called a silver cord by some. This silver cord is said to be attached in different places depending on the culture. Some say it's in the navel, some say it's in the third eye, and some say it's on the back of the head. Regardless, throughout many cultures who believe in astral projection, there's a cord that connects us. Getting back to your body can be as simple as, well, as I mentioned earlier, looking at your feet. There are different methods, as many as there are cultures that actively practice this phenomena. However, most of them are triggered by an intentional mind shift or focus on something mundane, like a moving or part of your body while concentrating. For instance, wiggling that toe. It was no coincidence that Dorothy was told to click her shoes together while repeating "there's no place like home" to snap out of her elaborate astral travel. Think about that one. Like I mentioned, many cultures throughout history have practiced and utilized astral projection as part of their lifestyles. Astral projection is in fact a very ancient practice. Even the Bible itself mentions some examples of astral projection. The final chapter of the book of Ecclesiastes is often cited in this respect. Quote, "Before the silver cord be loosed, or the golden bowl be broken, or the pitcher be shattered at the fountain, or the wheel be broken at the cistern." End quote. Another from the Bible is Paul's second epistle to the Corinthians, and more generally agreed to refer to as the astral planes. Quote, "I know a man in Christ who 14 years ago was caught up to the third heaven. Whether it was in the body or out of the body, I do not know. Only God knows." End quote. In ancient Egypt, similar concepts of soul travel appear in various other religious traditions. For example, ancient Egyptian teachings present the soul, Ba, as the ability to hover outside the physical body via the Ka, or subtle body. China is yet another culture that embraces astral projection and has a story that goes something like this. Xingzai, with a drum as his pillow, fell fast asleep, snoring and motionless. His primordial spirit, however, went straight into the banquet room, he said. Quote, "My lords, here I am again," end quote. When Tuizi walked with the officials to take a look, there really was a Taoist sleeping on the ground and snoring like the thunder. Yet inside, in the side room, there was another Taoist beating a fisher drum and singing a Taoist song. The officials all said, quote, "Although there are two different people, their faces and clothes are exactly alike. Clearly, he is a divine immortal who can divide his body and appear in several places at once," end quote. At that moment, the Taoist in the side room came walking out and the Taoist sleeping on the ground woke up. The two emerged into one. In Hinduism, the spiritual teacher Mahir Baba described one's use of astral projection. In the advancing stages leading to the beginning of the path, the aspirant becomes spiritually prepared for being entrusted with free use of the forces of the inner world of the astral bodies. He may then undertake astral journeys in his astral body, leaving the physical body in sleep or wakefulness. The astral journeys that are taken unconsciously are much less important than those undertaken with full consciousness. So he's talking the difference between an ubi, the out-of-body experience I was telling you about, and an actual astral projection, which again, an ubi, an out-of-body experience, is simply an uncontrolled astral projection. You have no control over it. You didn't will it to happen. Astral projection, you willed it to happen. You're making it happen. This implies conscious use of the astral body. Conscious separation of the astral body from the outer vehicle of the gross body has its own value in making the soul feel its distinction from the gross body and in arriving at fuller control of the gross body. One can, at will, put on and take off the external gross body as if it were a cloak, and use the astral body for experiencing the inner world of the astral and for undertaking journeys through it, if and when necessary. The ability to undertake astral journeys therefore involves considerable expansion of one's scope for experience. It brings opportunities for promoting one's own spiritual advancement, which begins with the involution of consciousness. Japan, Inuit, and even our friends down in the Amazon all contain cultures whom have also been embracers of astral projection. So as you can see, this practice has made its way around the world quite a bit over the centuries. As far as I'm concerned, a little too common amongst the cultures that are completely opposite of each other for this to be an imaginary or faked circumstance. Even our ancestral witches were believed to use astral projection oftentimes. It was believed and documented that witches of old would gather for Sabbats, and sometimes some of the coven couldn't make it to the location physically, so they would decide to do it astrally instead. They would rub a special ointment that was carefully prepared called flying ointment. This was rubbed on areas of the body, such as under the arms or around the genitals, in order to maximize absorption. With this, the witches would sit next to a fire, such as a hearth fire, and sweat. At this point, they would induce a drugged hallucination, making it easier for them to actually step out of their physical bodies and travel to the Sabbat at a distance. It's even been reported in ancient documents of witches at Sabbats seeing the spirits of the travelers and communicating with them. When the witch was ready to return back to their body, they would chant off a special rhyme, and that would return them to their bodies safely back at their hearth fire. Some believed they would actually place this ointment on the end of a broom and then stick it up, whatever orifice, as to promote the fast absorption. This is where some believe the whole stereotypical witch riding a broomstick came from. Personally, I believe that the witch riding a broomstick came from our ancestors of magic running through the crops astride brooms and jumping in the air to just show the crops how high to grow. It was a sympathetic magic. But regardless, the broomstick up the butt theory is definitely an interesting take on the matter, I guess. Anyway. Another very modern example of a type of astral projection would be that of remote viewing. This is a very real and very interesting phenomena that, as of lately in this century, has been studied and experimented with greatly by different world governments, especially Russia and the United States during the Cold War. I recently watched a documentary on this practice, and it was very successful. Originally, it was being incorporated for these specific seers to be able to travel to, for instance, Russia astrally and spy on people, places, and things, and especially locked up documents. This was heavily practiced until the Cold War ended, but recently has been reinstituted and even funded once again by various governments because the success rate was way too great to ignore the outcomes. So what they would do to achieve this remote viewing strategy was to have a person, for instance, a subject or a target, we'll call it, would drive or fly to a location miles, sometimes hundreds of miles away, to a location unbeknownst to the seer. The seer would simply be told to concentrate on the person that had physically traveled. The target would then just start looking around once they got to their designated area and exploring the area. The remote viewer would then awaken from his astral travel and quickly write down what he saw and or experienced, including drawing pictures of what he or she saw, supposedly through that person's eyes, for instance. The accuracy rate for most of these viewings, even for beginners in the experiment, were greater than 70% accuracy overall. That's pretty damn good for something that is thought to be a farce or not a real circumstance. The expert seers, those that did exceptionally well, which had a number like greater than 90% accuracy rate, were actually hired and utilized by their governments to assist in spying and gathering of intelligence. At one point, the United States and Russia actually joined forces studying and experimenting with this phenomena. It's obvious obvious, to me anyways, that this practice is very real, just like many of the practices in witchcraft and the occult, and also very misunderstood. Again, living in the gray can be lonely, but absolutely fascinating at the same time. Living in the gray. So many of you have asked me when, if ever, will I ever write a book? That I'm not sure, but if I ever do, I think I'm going to call it Living in the Gray, Teachings from a Gardnerian Mystic. I don't know. Anyways, moving right along. So Manon, enough explaining what astral projection is and convincing us that it's real. How do I do this myself? Well, I'm glad you asked. For just $399.99, I will send you a vial of water that you can drink, and you too will be an astral projector. Sorry, couldn't resist, had to throw that in there. Can you actually believe that there are actual and real TV commercials out there that actually sell vials of water to people that supposedly have been blessed by the Lord Jesus Christ, for instance, and will help the purchaser out from everything from money to healing to finding love, etc., etc. I mean, but now that I think about it, there are spells that are sold to the masses for the same thing, so think about that one. Anyways, so there are a few ways to break into the world of astral projection. So let's go over a few of them now. So the first one is really the easiest, but it's also the least effective in maintaining control of your travel. This is more of a forced out-of-body experience, but a great way to begin the experience if you've never experienced this sensation before. When you lay down at night to go to sleep, simply get completely relaxed. See yourself sleeping in your bed. Once you get a good solid picture of yourself, see yourself sitting up while your body remains lying down. Next, get out of the bed and see in your mind's eye your home and walking through from a first-person view. Do this for a few minutes. You'll be interrupted from time to time by monkey mind. Don't let it bother you. Just gently drift back to your vision. After a few minutes of this, concentrate on yourself returning to your body and then drift off to sleep. If I'm correct, this will give you a very good chance to experience an out-of-body experience after you've fallen asleep. It's kind of like a prerequisite. It's like a prerequisite type deal. Like it gets things started. If you do, you'll experience this flying feeling I spoke of earlier, possibly anyways. That's what I experience. Yours may be different. Regardless, many know they've been traveling because of the full body jerk you will most likely experience when you awaken to your spirit being yanked back to your body by the silver cord. Another practice that is a little more difficult involves meditation. The process involves going into a deep meditative state, and then much like what I just explained earlier, you would see yourself rising from your body and traveling to your selected location or astral plane. So when I was coming up as a young Gardnerian witch, my high priestess taught us all how to begin our journey of astral projection by utilization of a group dynamic. This method was very productive and basically consisted of sort of a path working that she would perform off the cuff. I work with my covens utilizing this same practice, only I take it a step further and receive outstanding results. If you have a few people you can work with, even just one other person, this method is truly amazing and very successful. So get with your group in a nice, quiet, and comfortable spot. Everyone should lay down flat on their backs to do this method. You can have some light music playing in the background, but as I've mentioned a million times before, never have words in any craft music you would play for a ritual. It's very important the music is only instruments, no words being said to infiltrate your mind as you work. This method starts out very much like the typical method I mentioned earlier. Your standard meditation preparation works best. For tips on this, see my video linked above and also listed down in the description below on how to meditate and a few other things. Once everybody's laying relaxed and ready, you or a person needs to be the initial leader to guide everyone to the next step. This step is simply speaking aloud and guiding everyone to gently rise from their bodies. This is best done by simply sitting up. Guide them all to simply sit up in their mind's eye. You should see yourself, your spirit self, sitting up whilst your physical body remains lying down. This is the hardest part, and this can take some time so be patient about it. Give everyone a chance to disconnect, so to speak, and begin to leave their physical shell. This is where the interesting part of the technique takes place. Everyone present should now speak out loud where they are at in the process. In actuality, letting everyone else know where they are and at how it's going. This allows for all of the participants to, in effect, see with their mind's eye what is actually going on with their fellow travelers and where they're at. Your participants should speak aloud where they are at in the room and where they're gonna move to. The participants should speak aloud an active description of what they're seeing around them. which will basically just be describing the actual room they are in. They should also see each other and describe it. It may sound a little like this. I've sat up from my body and now I feel myself hovering just above the floor. I'm presently next to my body. Shelley, I can see you too. And Robert, I see you too. Shelley, I see you hovering about 3 feet from your body. And Robert, you're still trying to get up. I'm gonna move over to the bookshelf. Now, Shelley may say, out loud, yes, I see you. I can see you move to the bookshelf. I'm going to join you and see if I can see the books clearly. Robert may say, for instance, I'm having trouble moving, but I can see the two of you very clearly by the bookshelf, etc., etc. The scenario should carry out something in that manner. Just speak aloud, explaining what you're seeing and what you're doing. It's very simple. Simply speaking out loud what you see, what you're going to try and do moving forward. This is a multiple step process, meaning this is something that should be routinely practiced several gatherings, not all at one time. First, you may want to practice just being in the room you're physically in and experiment in those confines. Next gathering, you may want to get everyone in the room up and ready and then decide to travel outside the room to other parts of the dwelling. Take your time with this practice. What you will begin to realize is that what you thought was simply in your mind's eye is actually a lot more than that. You'll begin to realize that you are actually astrally projecting just as successfully as the ancient gurus of our ancestors. One way to expound upon this practice is to also set up little challenges. For instance, after you have successfully accomplished a few sessions, one session, grab a deck of tarot cards, for instance, before you go into your starting room. Grab a card from the middle of the deck, whatever, randomly, and don't look at it. Go to a coffee table, for instance, and place the card face up on the coffee table, again with no one looking at it. Now go to your astral projection start room and do your thing. Now this time, have everyone eventually work their way over to the coffee table, astrally of course, and look at the face up tarot card. Don't speak this aloud, what you see. This you keep to yourself so you don't influence someone else's, what they're seeing. Just remember the key components of what you see for the card. Now after everyone has returned, which by the way, try and keep any of these sessions relatively short, maybe 10 minutes or so. Have each person explain what they saw for the card. Describe it in detail. Don't just say, I saw the devil card, for instance. Afterwards, everyone go out to the table and see what card is physically there. I can bet you'll be very, very pleasantly surprised at the results you get. Soon you can get where you're traveling well outside your establishment to faraway places, both earthly and otherwise, and with the comfort of your group in tow, sort of an astral road trip, so to speak. And this will segue me into another topic. And this is, where can you go as an astral traveler? Honestly, this is as vast as your mind can take you. And being that the Akashic records are real and do exist, in my opinion, this leaves you with a practically infinite amount of places to go and things to see. Some have even used astral projection to supposedly travel in time. As I described earlier, people have used astral projection to journey to places where they can't possibly get to physically. For instance, the witch traveling to the Sabbath in my earlier example. Some may use astral projection to journey to other realms, other vibrations, which are next to impossible to journey to without the spirit form being the chosen body to visit that particular vibration. Again, the places to travel to are only limited to you and your group if you choose to work with one. Some dangers of astral projection. Relatively, especially if done the way I've spoken about in this video, astral projection is a safe practice. When drugs and or hallucinogens get introduced to assisting with the astral projection, now is when the practice can be dangerous. Reasons primarily because, well, drugs are not safe to use many times and can lead to many problems and even death of the physical body. So for obvious reasons, I do not recommend, and I repeat, I do not recommend utilizing hallucinogens and drugs to accomplish or assist in astral projection. Also, when using drugs to help with astral projection achievement, you're giving up a certain amount of control and awareness. This means when done safely, you're in a complete control of who, what, when, where, and why you're journeying with a particular travel. And in essence, you can return to your physical body anytime you want. When drugs are used, sometimes you lose this control and become trapped in the astral, leaving you with having a very hard time getting back, which can be very disturbing and very traumatic. Basically, you would need to wait for the drugs to wear off before you can even return. This is why the witch example I gave you earlier, where they would travel to the Sabbats, they would sit in front of a fire after applying their hallucinogen. The fire, in fact, would assist them in sweating out the drug so that they had control to come back when they wanted. The drug, the flying ointment, was literally utilized to simply give them a kickstart into the astral, but not meant to keep them there. So the bottom line is, don't utilize drugs for this practice, in my opinion. Also, I've read that it's possible to sever the silver cord that infinitely connects you to your body. They say if the sever happens, your physical body in effect dies, leaving you astrally stranded. I don't know how you would sever this cord, nor why one would want to, or how it could happen accidentally. Again, I just read somewhere once that it's possible, but I do believe that if possible, it must be an extremely rare occurrence. I would think one way for it to sever would be from the physical body side. For instance, a person in the middle of an astral travel, their physical body dies. I don't know. Maybe they have a heart attack or something. At this point, I could see the sever happening, but I don't know for sure about this. There are many books on astral projection. Just hit up Amazon for some options. I once, about 20 years ago, had an entire astral projection kit. I believe it came with a book called the Astral Projection Workbook, and it had a card in it that you would pin to a wall and stare into it, and it would help you get into the mode of astral projection. It didn't work for me, but what did work for me ultimately was the group method I mentioned and talked about earlier, and also the dream method before you go to bed. The meditative state works for me too, but that one is very difficult and takes a lot of discipline, but extremely successful once mastered. Well, that's going to wrap up this episode of Witch in the Working. Have you ever had an out-of-body experience? Do you astral project from time to time? How do you do it? Where do you go? Let us all know in the comments below. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button, and ring that little bell to be reminded of future episodes to come. I love you guys and gals. Until the next episode, blessed be.